Hey, She Ace That listeners, find us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Every subscribe, like, and follow goes a long way, and I can't thank you all enough for your support. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to She Ace That. It's your host Alexandra, and today we have a true legend in the volleyball world, someone whose career spans decades of excellence. I'm talking about Ellen Dempsey. Ellen was a dual sport athlete at Michigan State, Go Green, competing in both volleyball and track. She then went on to become one of the most successful volleyball coaches in collegiate history. We're talking the winningest coach in Hiram College history with 2 conference championships, 4 NCAA tournament appearances, and 4 Coach of the Year awards. And before that, she was an extremely successful coach at Ohio University, leading them to their first MAC tournament appearance. And even before that, she took on Southern Oregon State to back-to-back conference championship matches in her first head coaching job and won Coach of the Year in 1989. And she was selected as an assistant coach for the 1994 U.S. Olympic Sports Festival. But here's what makes Ellen's story even more incredible is she didn't stop at coaching. After building championship programs and transforming young athletes' lives for decades, she's now the executive director of the Side Out Foundation, where she's leading the fight against metastatic breast cancer through volleyball's Side Out Dig Pink movement. Ellen Dempsey, welcome to She Ace That.
Well, thank you, Alexandra. That was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to that. So it's great
You,
to be here. Great to be here. Super excited and fun to be able to always talk to the volleyball community, whether it's players, parents, coaches. There's just not enough really good information out there. So it's always an opportunity and a great honor to be able to be here today.
Thank you. We are so honored to have you here. So I would like to go back to the beginning of your volleyball career and talk about Michigan State specifically. So what was it like playing volleyball and running track at Michigan State? How did you navigate doing both?
Interesting. So you have to understand when I was at Michigan State, Title IX went into effect in 1973, and that was
Mhm.
my freshman year in high school, 73, 74. So I was very fortunate to get the opportunity to actually play sports in high school, which led to the opportunity at Michigan State. And I was actually recruited to Michigan State on a track scholarship. And it just so happened that my high school volleyball team went to the state Final Four. And one of the Michigan State women's volleyball assistant coaches was there and saw me play. And I think what she saw was my athleticism. It was certainly not my volleyball IQ. I will promise you that for sure. And then I started getting some letters and notes from them. And, I'd already signed a letter of intent to run track at Michigan State. And so there was a little bit of conversation that had to be had with my track coach, Nell Jackson, to find out if she would be willing to allow me to do both. She was wonderful and said, absolutely, you can do that. And so jumped in fall of my freshman year to the volleyball team first for preseason. And the year before that, Michigan State had gone in the AIAW national championships, had finished 7th in the country. And they had graduated a really, really amazing class, including Kathy DeBoer, right? Who was a phenomenal player. So Kathy was at Michigan State as a 5th-year senior when I was a freshman. But what that meant for our team was there were quite a few players already on the team that had played in backup roles and were kind of waiting for their window of opportunity for this big class before them to graduate. And then there was whatever freshman came in, and I was a part of that freshman group. Interesting times, because back then there were no full-time volleyball coaches or full-time assistants. My coach was Annalise Knoppers, and she was actually a full-time professor. She taught statistics, right? And I think was a volleyball player in her own right. I think she played for McKaylee at one point. But they had all these other hats and jobs around campus that they were wearing. So there wasn't this comprehensive, what I would call now, program sense or feeling. And as I mentioned, I was just this really good athlete who didn't really know a whole heck of a lot about volleyball.
Interesting too, because nowadays I feel like they would almost deter you from playing multiple sports at that level in case of injuries,
Right.
that worry as well.
Yeah, I think so. And it ended up being a really good experience, but a very different one. I was a setter in high school. We ran a 4-2. I had never
Yeah.
played club. I didn't know what a 6-2 offense or a 5-1 offense were. And when I came to Michigan State, I was one of 2 setters. And so we went to our first scrimmage and they started me in the right back as a setter playing a 6-2. I had no clue what I was doing. My teammates said, Ellen, serve the ball. When we receive, just run up to the net and set. Well, they didn't tell me I had to ever go into the back row, right? So that literally lasted about 2 rotations, and then coach took me out and she said, "From now on, when you go in, you're an outside hitter." And we ended up doing a 5-1 offense my freshman year with the other freshman, Peggy Lukens, who was a wonderful setter
Yeah.
and knew the position. And really, they were trying to use my athleticism and made the assumption that I had played in all these had all this experience, which I didn't have. So I basically was an outside hitter my freshman year. A couple of tournaments actually played middle at 5'7", only because of the jumping ability and athleticism. And I think we may have been struggling trying to close the block or something. But it was a really interesting experience. For me, the part I remember the most is team, right? Whether it was the volleyball team, it reminded me so much of when I was in high school. Even when I ran track in high school, it felt like a team sport. You were out there competing with your teammates for your teammates, wanting to do as well as you could for the entire team. And when I made my transition in December to track and field, it was a rude awakening for me because at the collegiate level, track and field is very much an individual sport. I was a high jumper and a long jumper, and their plans were to train me to do the pentathlon. And so, I would spend a morning workout with this coach and then an afternoon workout with the jumps coach. And then I was kind of jumping all over the place. And I just didn't get that sense of team. So quite honestly, I ran track my entire indoor freshman season and then started leaning towards, boy, I just really miss volleyball. I miss my teammates. I miss that connectedness. And I learned something about myself. I wasn't an individual sport athlete. I didn't really care about myself. And if I won, it was more important to me to be a part of something that was bigger than me. Right. So suffice it to say, my second year, they decided, maybe you shouldn't play volleyball. We want you to focus on track because we want you to do the pentathlon. So I did that. And by the time I got to the end of my sophomore year, I was like, this just really isn't for me. I think I belong on the volleyball court. And so I gave my track scholarship back and headed into my junior year planning on being a full-time volleyball player. And unfortunately got injured in August of preseason. I had a career-ending injury and was never able to play again. I had a severe break in my left ankle. So ended up student assistant, student manager, and traveled with the team and went to practices. And that's where I really kind of got the coaching bug, right?
It's really unique to find that in a college level. Most people nowadays, you kind of have to have it figured out during grade school. It's always interesting, what those changes are that make you lean towards one or the other. And it's just really unique that you had a full ride for track or scholarship for track, and then you were able to transition to something else completely. Can you share a little bit about how women's collegiate volleyball has evolved, especially from your coaching perspective since your playing days?
Well, so let's talk about the obvious first. So I was an outside hitter at 5'7", and granted I had a 31-inch vertical jump, but I was 5'7". And it is rare today that you even see a libero that is 5'7". Most of the liberos are up in the, 5'9" to 5'10"
Mhm.
range, right? The players are so much bigger physically than they used to be. And there is so much more focus on not just when I trained, it was 9 hours a day during preseason. We had 3 3-hour sessions with a lot of single skill stuff. It wasn't as closely related to live real-time gameplay, situational play. So training has changed in advance as more knowledge in exercise physiology and training have come available. And as coaches are now in full-time roles where this is their primary focus and the only thing they're doing, I think recruiting is much, much more aggressive and organized. The support staff that you have now as an athlete is phenomenal, right? And I'll say this, it's a business. At the Division I, Big Ten level, it is a business. And you have to decide as an athlete, is that where you fit? Is that where you're comfortable? Because part of that is they're going to dictate. Yes, you're going to get your degree, but they may dictate when you take classes, how you take classes, because you've got to work around training schedules, travel schedules. They're traveling year round. You're seeing high school seniors graduating in December and taking off to campus and starting to train with the team in January of what would normally their senior year. So the
Yeah.
landscape really changed a lot.
It's always a dream to want to fulfill your passion, get a scholarship. But there's so much commitment that goes into it as well that I think nowadays more than ever, there is just so much visibility to that. And at least there are maybe more student athlete guidance when it comes to navigating full-time athlete role and a full-time student role and, even injury prevention and things like that. But it's still so much on your plate on top of figuring out who you are at that
Mhm.
age, going into college.
It is. It's amazingly exciting, to step on the floor. I remember my freshman year, we went to UCLA for an invitational tournament, and I got to see some of the greats who played on the Olympic team. Sue Woodstra, Debbie Green, who was a setter for USC. I got to play against them, and I was so enamored because obviously I wanted to learn. I was like a sponge. I wanted to learn as much as I could, and I felt like athletically I could hang, but it's really tough to make up that number of years of live real-time match experience at that level, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the difference maker in a lot of programs and a lot of teams.
I know you brought up a little bit of your academic background as well regarding exercise science and kinesiology. Did that influence your coaching philosophies at all, or what did you take from that when starting your coaching career?
It did for sure, because for me, being fit meant that we could train during preseason and have less of a risk that you might get injured. Because if you're physically fit and you're in shape, then we're ready to start doing the work. Now the challenge is it's a team and not everybody comes in at the same level of fitness, right? Nowadays they're year round, so they know exactly where they're at almost every day. We would oftentimes the kids would leave at the end of the spring semester and they wouldn't come. We wouldn't see them again until either camp or in August when they came back for preseason. And it was always boy, let's hope they're ready. If they've done the workout program, they should have a decent base. But then it's your job as a coach, regardless of where they end up. And I used to tell my team this all the time. I want you in the best shape possible because that's going to allow us to maximize our time on the court with touches and make them quality touches. But if you're not quite there, then it's my job to modify what we're doing and for you to remember that we have 3 more months to get into shape here because what matters is
Mhm.
playoff, right? And this is preseason. Maybe we're not where we need to be, but we have the time to get there. And we just both, athlete and coach, have to work together and be smart about what we're choosing to do based on, an athlete's physical fitness level. If they have injuries that they're rehabbing, those sorts of things.
From that perspective, when injuries do arise, is that something that you just really continue to maintain that athlete's mental health and physical health while they're recovering? Like, what are your expectations when those injuries do happen, or even if it, ends somebody's career, especially in volleyball?
I mean, for kids, and it's less that way at Division 1, but it's still that way a little bit at Division 2 and 3. When they get injured, sometimes in their mind they go right to, "Oh gosh, I can't do anything," right? And they just have to heal. They have to go to the training room. They have to do rehab. They just have to heal. But the reality is there's so much that they can be involved in and do that doesn't require any on-court physical stress to that injured limb or arm or whatever it is. And that's our job as coaches to help them understand that, buy into that, and then attack it aggressively. Your mind, the neck up is an amazing, amazing organ. And if we are constantly working on our volleyball IQ and on being smarter and making the better decisions and choices and observing things and asking questions as to why what's happening is happening and how do I defend that? How do I stop that? How do I, you know, react to that or respond to that? It's probably even a better term. And that rehab time can happen and then they're not quite so far removed as they may have been if they just mentally checked out for the 2 weeks that they were out because they had a sprained ankle or an injury.
No matter what the injury is, big or small, it's always that immediate, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss a game, a practice, a season. It's something that seems so dooming, but when you have the proper support, it can get you, back on the court a little bit faster or get you into another role like coaching where you can still be a part of the sport that you love. Even though it was an awful time for you, it was also a catalyst to the rest of the accomplishments that you've had with your coaching career, which I think is amazing.
I learned so much that time that I was out and on the bench, and not just from watching our team play and watching the things that our coach would do, but I probably learned just as much or more from watching some of our opponents play
Mhm.
and see what their coaches were doing. And I remember sitting on the bench during one timeout watching Marcy Weston, who was the head coach at Central Michigan at the time. And she was this really charismatic leader. And I'm looking at that timeout, and those kids are huddled around her and their eyes are locked on her. And I so wanted to be just a little on her shoulder. I just wanted what it was she was saying. And so then after the timeout, we're trying to figure out what she said based on what I saw them trying to do, you know.
I was fortunate enough to go to the Michigan State U of M volleyball game a couple weeks ago, and I was like sitting right behind Coach Kelsey, and I was just like, so enamored by what she was saying in the moment, why the certain things that she decided to focus on fixing, or the things or the battles that she didn't need to bring up at that time too. It's like picking and choosing what is most effective for your team and the mindset and space that they're
Mm.
in, within the on and off the court. And I think I just can fully relate to you on that. Different coaches have different philosophies. I do want to pivot to the 1994 U.S. Olympic Sports Festival. Can you tell us about that experience that you had and how that came to light?
Yeah, so that was really a phenomenal experience. And first, what I'll say is the reason I got that opportunity was based on what I had done professionally and the network that I had plugged myself into. I think in my mind, I made the decision that I wanted to coach Division I volleyball. And so I actually talked to Kathy DeBoer, right? Because I didn't finish my playing career on the court. And I asked for her advice about how do I get back to Division I as a coach. When I got injured, not only was I our student assistant at Michigan State, but I became an assistant coach and then the head coach at Lansing Community College. I coached high school, because in Michigan back then, college was in the fall and high school was in the winter. I coached club volleyball. And then I started putting myself out there and volunteering to work camps during the summer so I could meet other coaches. They could get to know me. I could learn from them and kind of start to expand and develop my network. So at the time I got the Olympic sports opportunity, I was the assistant coach at the University of Maryland, and I had just accepted the position as the head volleyball coach at Ohio University. And I don't remember the timing exactly, but in Maryland, Cecile Renaud was a longtime head coach at Florida State. Maryland was in the ACC conference along with Florida State. So I had met Cecile on numerous occasions, not just competing against her when she would come to Maryland or us going to Florida State, but then on the road recruiting. A lot of time spent in gyms, right? Particularly back then when there wasn't the internet the way there is now, right? And video wasn't as big of a thing. So I'd gotten to meet her, and she had been a long time participant with USA Volleyball. She was really pivotal and instrumental in helping American Volleyball Association get up and running and going and supporting Kathy in her mission there. And so I had established a little bit of a relationship with her, and she was one of the regional coordinators. And this was a position that you apply for. So you just basically went to the USA site and you applied, you submitted your resume and you had listed your references, and they went through the resumes and just selected who they wanted to have conversation with. And then based on that conversation, they either offered you an opportunity or not. And it was about a 2.5 week, almost 3 week opportunity. The National USA Volleyball doesn't do this anymore. And I think the reason why is the cost involved. But it was a really, really cool, unique thing. It was a mini Olympics. Okay. They would do it in the alternate year of the Olympics. So if the Olympics were in 90, they would have a sports festival in 88. So every 2 years, you'd either be the real Olympics or there'd be a sports festival. They'd identify a site. Ours was in St. Louis, and they'd bring all of the athletes and all of the coaches to Washington University's campus. And during that 2.5 week period, it was a mini Olympics for USA athletes only. And it was a place where all of the national team coaches for the various sports could come and watch the top athletes in their particular sport train and compete. And they tried to model it as much as possible to be the experience that the athletes would feel and experience when they're actually going to the Olympics. So it started when you got off the plane. They had here, all decorated USA athletes this way. We rode buses. They were issued us all of our USA gear. We got assigned our team. We met our team. We had X number of days to train with that team. And then we did like a mini round robin tournament that ran 2 or 3 days. And then based on that tournament, they seeded us for medal rounds. And we went in and did medal round competition. And those were in the evening. And so you would have men's basketball players or track and field athletes or crew, other athletes coming to watch your events. And there were events going on constantly. It was a wonderful experience. I was an assistant coach for the South. And I remember Misty May, if I get this right, I don't know, no, maybe it wasn't Misty. I think Misty May was on our team. She was still a high school senior then, I believe. It's really fun to work with that level of athlete. Kristen Fokel, who was a big time player, was there. So to work with that level of athlete where you can just say, hey, try this. And they go, oh, okay, like this. And they just do it they don't need anything else. Just a really wonderful experience and a great opportunity, again, to network and to learn, rub elbows with all of these very, very successful coaches and learn from them.
Connections are big, getting jobs, getting onto sports teams. It's unfortunate that they don't have that anymore. I feel like that would be so beneficial. There's other ways to connect and get visibility, but that in-person interaction, everybody's just in the same mindset. It's a real, to hear about. That was really cool.
Yeah, it was a great experience. And I agree. I would love to see it happen again. I just don't think timing and finances will allow that. So many other ways to see players. And back then we just didn't have any other way. So that made the most sense.
It's so true. And even recruiting now, it's like you can make like a Instagram or social media page. There's just so many easier ways to get your name out there, to get your videos out there.
Always those intangible things, right?
Yeah.
When I coached college, it didn't matter what level I was recruiting at. I would love to see videos and, hey, send them, I'll watch them. What the video is going to tell me is whether or not I need to see you in person.
Right.
But
Right.
then I want to watch you in person on more than one occasion if I think I might like you, because I want to see you in as many different scenarios as possible to make sure that what I saw wasn't a peak performance, right? That it's consistent. And you can learn a lot during matches when teams are losing and how they respond to their coaches, how they respond to their parents. My big thing is I really disliked when I would see players standing at the end of the bench waving their water bottle, and then mom would come running down and grab it and fill it up for them. And I was like, are you kidding me? I said, your parents drove you here. They paid the money for you to participate. They're driving you to all of these practices, and you can't be invested enough to make sure you're prepared for the start of a match and fill your water bottle. That tells me a lot about you as an athlete. It tells me where I'm going to be starting with you if I were to bring that athlete into our program.
You are able to observe a lot how they're interacting with teammates. You can tell, if they're there as an individual or as a team player. In the team player aspect, like how have you handled situations where you might notice that somebody could be negatively, impacting the team? How do you go about that?
Well, if it's a player on my team, we're going to sit down and have a conversation, right? And I think on the front end, it's really, really important that you're clear as a coach, and for all of your players, not just your starters, that you've clearly communicated to them what their role is and what your expectations are. And they may not like the role that you have to offer them right away. They may want a bigger role or a different role, and I'm okay with that. But I'm going to make sure I give them the information to arm them that if you want this role that's bigger, here are the things that you need to work on. Here are the things that I need to see, whether it's in practice, whether it's in competition, whether it doesn't have anything to do with volleyball, but it's outside of the court. Maybe it's socially or academically, not in the right place, right? What we mostly know as coaches is that if our athletes are happy and they feel like they're included and they feel like they have opportunity, then they're less distracted and they're going to come to practice and you're going to maximize what you're able to get out of them. And they're going to improve and move quicker, right? But if they have distractions, whether it's homesickness or personal boyfriend, girlfriend, doesn't really matter. If there are social issues, if they're struggling in school, all of those things weigh on their minds. And it's mental health and they spend so much time with us. I think it's important and it's a responsibility of ours to help them learn how to navigate their world and their life. Some kids walk in the door and they can just do it. Other kids get stuck. And when they get stuck, they want to turn and run the other way. Or they're just stuck and they don't know what to do. And part of that is they don't know what to ask. Social media is great, but one of the things I noticed in the last 10 years was I have kids that don't know how to have a conversation with professor. They can't have a meaningful conversation with a teammate that perhaps there's something going wrong. Now they can text till the cows come home, right?
Sure. Yeah, or hide behind a screen on the social media.
Real-time meaningful conversation is difficult.
Part of my reason for asking, I don't know why I've been seeing it a lot, but when I am on social media, I've been seeing a lot of high schoolers, like especially volleyball players, commenting, saying like how, I don't know, their high school team and coach dynamic is like negatively impacting them from a mental health perspective. And they're just hiding behind a screen, commenting about it instead of
Right.
going to their coach and stating, hey, coach, I'm having a rough week or I'm having a rough day. Like, can I work on X, Y, or Z during practice instead? Or how can we work together on this? What I see a lot is them complaining on their own versus actually taking the problem head on and allowing the off the court stuff to be talked about and discussed and find a resolution sooner than, maybe it taking weeks to actually be brought up. And I think it's just really important to be an advocate as both a player and a coach when it comes to mental health and things that are ongoing so that you don't negatively, impact your team dynamic unnecessarily.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's venting and right now for me, I view a lot of texting and comments that I see, that's players venting. And
Mhm.
back in the day, nobody heard that. Maybe one teammate in a locker room heard that. And really what it is, it's them thinking out loud and processing. And they just have to understand that they've got to learn the skill set to communicate directly in real time, right? As an athletic director, I would sit down with all of our parents when they would come for orientation over the summer, and I would tell them, look, your son or daughter is going to come in and they're going to have come from being the star on their high school team to now on a different level team where everyone was a star in high school. And so their role may or may not be the same. And I said, I will not, as athletic director, nor will our coaches have conversation with parents about playing time, right? This is your son or daughter's opportunity to learn how to be an advocate for themselves. And then I just kind of tell them, here is what I promise you our coaches will do if a student athlete comes to them and they want a bigger role, they're not happy with their role. This is what they will communicate with them. They will tell them why this is the opportunity that they have now. They'll let them know if they want a bigger opportunity, what it is they have to do and focus on. So that the athlete may not always like all of the answer, but they're going to learn to have that conversation. And that's a difficult thing for mom and dad because we kind of are still in that helicopter parent era
Mhm.
uh, where they just want to do and see their child be the best and get the best opportunities possible, and they want them to be happy. I think athletes are happy when they learn how to advocate for themselves, when they feel good about who they are and what they're doing.
It's so true. Instead of having a parent in their ear of like, why aren't you on the court this amount of time? And that's a bummer for me. I have such a positive relationship with my volleyball journey
Mhm.
and my coaches. So I think
Mhm.
it just shocks me when there's so much negativity around the aspect of sports and volleyball. I always felt it was like a privilege to be a part of the team. I always felt like I was given the opportunity to do this and handle those conversations myself. At the end of the day, having that open communication is so important.
There's a lot of victims out there. A lot of people like to play the victim card, and I'm just not a victim person like you. I'm very much the glass is always half full, and I'm
Yep.
very optimistic. And regardless
Yep.
of the scenario, we're going to try and make it better. And I think if you're willing to roll your sleeves up and invest and do the work, you'd be shocked at what you can really accomplish. Unfortunately, in our world right now, it seems much easier to just point fingers and play the victim card.
Yep.
And you just have to decide are you gonna hang out with that group or are you gonna move forward?
It just needs to be a continuous conversation that people do talk about because it shouldn't be something that's accepted. And with coaching philosophies, do you have a few values or things that you have always relied on throughout your coaching career?
It's always been important to me that people understand that I look at volleyball and coaching in volleyball. It's a wonderful experience and it's super exciting, but it's a vehicle. Sport is a
Mhm.
vehicle for life, right? And there's a skill set that athletes learn from a very young age that it's my job as a coach to make sure that they understand that skillship, working as part of a team, leadership, dealing with failure. There's a million things you could list in that list, that skill set, that they own that skill set. And that's something that we're going to continue to develop for them on the court, but we're also going to develop that for them off the court, right? So, everyone has that class in college where like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it through this. I hate this, right? And the first response is push it away. Don't invest the time. Don't spend the energy on it because you don't like it. And the reality is, when I sit with a student athlete and they tell me that, and they say, I'm thinking about changing my major, and I ask them why, I say to them, if you were not happy with how you were passing, what would you do? And they said, well, I would come to ask for more individual help. I would get more time in the gym. I would try and make more touches. They have a laundry list of what they would do. And I said, Have you done any of those things to make yourself a better student in the classroom, in math or in chemistry or whatever? And so it's even though these athletes have that skill set, sometimes they don't realize it translates to everything in their lives. So for me, philosophically, I look at athletes in three buckets. I want to make sure that they're successful and doing as well as they possibly can on the court. I want them to be successful socially, and I want them to be successful academically. And so it's my job to kind of watch over those three buckets and help them find their way, right? Because that's what college is about. It's about practicing life and getting out there and trying things for the first time,
Mhm.
finding their voice, right? And my goal is that when they walk across that stage 4 years later, that they're gonna do 2 things. They're gonna just stop for a minute, and they're gonna look back and go, "Oh my god, I would do this over in a heartbeat." But then turn back around and continue walking knowing that they're ready for what's next. So
Did you see any differences between coaching at Division 1 levels, Division 3 levels?
the game is the game, and the sport is
Mhm.
the sport, and I can tell you when I first went to Division 3, within the first week of preseason practice, the kids asked me, "Are you bored? Do you like" you know? I said, "What are you talking about?" And they go,
Yeah.
"Well, you've been so much at Division 1, you played Division 1. Why are you here?" And I was like, "Okay, we need to sit down and have a conversation." And I was like, "Look, you guys, I love volleyball. I love the sport. I love the opportunity that it creates for you guys as individuals, for us as a team. I love to compete, but it doesn't matter the level, right?" I said, "What's the biggest difference between Division 1 and Division 3? Bigger, faster, stronger, right? Their middles are 6'7", our middles are 6 foot, 6'1". Okay. It's the same game.
Mhm.
And once they understood that, for me, I really look at myself as an educator. The passion and joy for me came from helping them decide what they wanted and then helping them get there, right? But I can't do it for them. So I
Mhm.
didn't come into Hiram and train the maximum hours that you're allowed to train in Division 3, right? Because if I did that, I probably would have blown that team up because they weren't ready for that. When they asked for more, I gave them more until we got to that point by our 3rd year when we were doing the maximum allowed at Division 3. Because then it's their team. They're driving the bus, right? And that's what I wanted.
That makes sense. Each year, each team is different, even if you have similar athletes staying. And I think it's the coach's duty, but it also makes you a much better coach by thinking what is best for your team versus trying to push them to their max or breaking point, and that will actually, end in the opposite way than we hope for. So I think it's
Oh, yeah.
really helpful.
Results happen based on the process, like what you do every day. And for me, we would have a lot of conversations with our kids coming into the season about, okay, what do you want your legacy to be? Right? When you're no longer here, what do you want people to say about your contributions and what you've done on the court, in the classroom, for this institution? Right? How do you want to be remembered? And we did that just to get them to think because they don't think about that. They're thinking really small and short term and immediate because that's how they've been trained in our technological world that we live in.
Yeah,
And I wanted them to think bigger and broader. So we would constantly try and nudge them and push them and get them to think and process. The best teams for me to ever coach are the teams that I don't really have to say much because they're students of the game and they see what's going to happen and they know how to make an adjustment. And I don't have to burn a timeout just to tell them to make an adjustment. Right.
that's a great point. And I see a lot of successful coaches are the ones that aren't talking the whole game. They are the ones sitting there because they are trusting their team and able to rely on their team to remember or remind themselves to fulfill their roles. Before we get into highlighting Dig Pink, which I am really looking forward to talking about, I do want to talk about the volleyball travel abroad that you organize.
Mhm.
Can
Yeah.
you give us, how important those cultural experiences were for your student athletes and what made you do that in the first place?
Yeah, so, it really goes back to when I was at Michigan State. I really wanted to do a study abroad, and, at that time, they weren't doing that for women's teams at the Division 1 level. I don't even think there were any rules yet in the NCAA that you could, because there would be additional competition potential outside of your normal season. But I remember having a conversation with my advisor, and I told him that I was looking about doing this study abroad, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, that's great. That's amazing." He said, "You'll have a great time." He goes, "And when you get back, just know you're going to have an extra 2 semesters before you graduate. So there was no accommodation made for what I was doing or any credit that was going to count. And it was going to cost me additional money, which I didn't have. Right. So I kind of just shelved that idea when he said that and walked out going, okay, that's not going to happen. And I never forgot that. And when I came to do Division 3, the philosophy at Division 3 is I think different from an institutional perspective. Division 3 looks at athletics as a part of the entire academic curriculum, right? And there's more space for doing things outside of the box at a liberal arts college to enhance your overall experience. Because of the size of the institutions alone, you don't take very many multiple choice tests. Most of the time it's essay or it's group projects. And ironically, those are things that when you go out in the real workforce in the world is what you're going to have to be able to do and do well. And there's a lot more hands-on. And I remember sitting in a class in Michigan State. It was the Chem 100 series for the first year chem students.
Yeah.
And it was a recordings. I just listened to recordings and would take quizzes. I never even had a conversation with anybody. And I did that because I got the opportunity to play sports. And that's what drove me to go to Michigan State was that chance to play at that level and compete and
Mhm.
see how I could do. But on the back end, thinking about it as a coach recruiting, when I would have players that would go, well, I might have this chance to play Division 1, as a preferred walk-on or whatever, I would just have the conversation, say, you know what, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. You've got to sort those out and decide what's most important. If you're getting a preferred walk-on spot, you're not guaranteed you're going to play.
Mhm.
And they could bring someone in to pass you by the next year, but yet they're going to control every minute of every day of what's going on in your world. Because training's going to come first, travel, competing. If you're going and they're giving you a scholarship and you're going to have a role, and by God, go, because it's an experience of a lifetime. I
Mhm.
had it. No other time in your life are you going to get to play against the Sue Woodstras and the Debbie Greens of the world, right?
Yeah.
And to have that opportunity, take advantage of it. But if you're not going to get that opportunity, what else is it that you want out of your college experience? Can you go somewhere and be a part of a successful program that maybe is competing for championships, right? But then not have to sacrifice control of your academic schedule, have the chance to perhaps study abroad and have that count towards graduation and, maybe serve on student senate or do research, right?
Mhm.
I just think that's something that each individual has to make that choice for themselves. But for me, the study abroad thing, it went way back to when I was a student at Michigan State. And when I got to Division 3, I was like, all right, I'm doing this. We're going to raise money. These kids are going to go abroad. And we went to Italy and Greece. We went to
Wow.
Barbados a couple of times. Those are the things that they remember. They remember more about that than they remember any tournament, NCAA tournament victory or conference championship.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's such a cool opportunity to have, especially because you would think, with just collegiate level sports, it's like, okay, that's the only thing you have time for. But at the end of the day, it's still important to put your passions first as well in correlation to whatever you're doing from an athletic standpoint, because it's not helpful to only like pigeonhole yourself in one area. It's helpful to continue your passions elsewhere so you can also fill your bucket in other ways, so then you can even pour more out onto the court.
It's life changing and it changes your perspective when you see how other cultures live, right? And
Mhm.
that's part of, I think, what a great college experience can offer.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I do have a question for you. When was the last time you've been back to Michigan State?
Gosh, I was in East Lansing last January because I had done I was at the MIVCA coaching clinic in Grand Rapids that week. And so I stopped in East Lansing, had dinner with friends, but back
Love
to campus or to see a match, it's been quite a while. I've not lived in the state of Michigan, gosh, probably in 30 years. And my family is all grown. I'm from a very large family, but I'm second youngest, and I only have a few siblings that actually still live in the state, you know?
I do want to get into raising awareness about, the Side Out Foundation and Pink specifically. It was something that in my high school career, we would always do pink outs and our fundraising would go there. So I know in 2010, while still coaching at Hiram, you coordinated your first Dig Pink event. And now a couple of years ago, you are now the executive director at Side Out. I would love to ask you to maybe provide some information on the Side Out Foundation and Dig Pink specifically, and maybe share with our listeners what exactly is metastatic breast cancer and why is it such an important thing to focus on and share about?
Absolutely. So the Side Out Foundation, Side Out is old school volleyball scoring, right? In
Mhm.
volleyball, it used to be that you had to have control of the serve in order to score points. And now we play rally scoring, so it no longer exists. But when the foundation was started, that's where Rick Dennis, who's our founder, came up with the name for the organization because it was a way to help metastatic breast cancer patients take back some control of their lives and of their cancer journey, right? So the foundation was founded just about 20 years ago, 2004. Okay. And it's specifically designed to help metastatic breast cancer patients now, while also continuing to do our own in-house research to move the needle on treatment options to help improve length of life and quality of life. So metastatic, what that means is someone has breast cancer and that cancer has actually metastasized. It's traveled through the lymph and it's in other organs in the body. Okay, so that's what metastatic means. And once a cancer becomes metastatic, there right now is no cure. Okay. So the focus is on trying to first and foremost improve the length of life and the quality of that life that metastatic breast cancer patients have, which we've been able to do while continuing to work to move the needle forward and eventually hopefully find a cure. Okay? So here's how can I say this? We have two fundraising platforms that we use to fund the work that we do and the support that we offer. One is Dig Pink. A lot of people don't know this, but Dig Pink is actually trademarked by the Side Out Foundation. So if a school or an organization is hosting a Dig Pink event, technically it means that any funds that they raise should go to the Side Out Foundation. Now, we're a very small organization. We're not going to chase people down. We're happy they're doing something, right? But we want to try and help educate folks. So if we see someone's hosting a Dig Pink event and they aren't registered with us, we will reach out and first and foremost thank them for what they're doing, and then also share with them more about the organization and the support services that we have to offer that can help make their event a lot more enjoyable and a lot lighter lift for them, whether it's the parent organizer or the coach that's doing the work, planning the event. So we do two things with the money that's raised. First is we help patients now. So if a patient is been diagnosed with MBC, they can reach out to us and send us their pathology for their cancer cell. We will then take that to our lab. We'll run that in our bioinformatics portal against every FDA approved cancer drug out there, not just breast cancer drugs, but every FDA approved cancer drug.
Wow.
And what we're trying to do is make sure that the drug that is going to be chosen for each cancer patient is going to be the most effective. Because there's no cure, time matters. So we don't want to put patients on drugs and then find out in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks that it's not working and have to then switch them to something else, right? Because there are residual effects to all of these medications. They're hard on the body, right? The quality of life continues to kind of slowly deteriorate. Chip Petricoin, who leads our research lab, he says it's kind of the rule of halves. If someone has been diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer and they're on a treatment, and let's say that right now they're projecting that they should live for 4 years, if that treatment stops working and they have to switch them to something else, now they may only have 2 years left. And if they have to switch again, they may only have a year. So getting a patient put on the most effective drug as quickly as possible is really, really critical. Now, we turn this around and we send this report back to the patient and their oncologist within 2 to 4 weeks of when we get it.
Wow.
So, this is something that will help patients right now. It'll help them and their oncologist guide their treatment decisions. Okay. And we provide that on the front end and we pay for that. So,
Wow.
if a patient doesn't have insurance or maybe the insurance they have only is going to cover a portion of the test,
Mhm.
we will cover the rest of it, right? So we raise funds to help pay for those patients, for those precision medicine analysis. At the same time, we continue to invest in ongoing research to try to continue to identify drugs that are more effective with less side effects that can help improve quality of life and length of life. Okay? Now, the value to us doing our own research is if I were an outside organization, I applied for a grant. I would have to write up, this is what I'm going to study, and I'll get awarded this grant. So they give me the grant. I do this study. I could be 2/3 of the way through this study and realize this isn't going to help me. It's not going to tell me what I need to know. But grant dollars were only allocated for that study. So I have to finish that study regardless of whether it's going to help move the needle for a breast cancer patient. Because we consult with our labs and we contract them, they work at our request based on the data. So that every patient that we do a precision medicine analysis, their data then goes into this larger bioinformatics portal that is going to benefit a future metastatic breast cancer patient. And our
Wow.
lab continues to do research using all of the data that's in that portal. The most exciting thing that I have to share right now is that we actually have a patent pending. We should know by next April if it's approved, but it's for a biomarker test that will tell physicians and oncologists whether or not this particular drug will be effective. That's
Wow.
huge,
Wow.
right? And that's something that's probably the most recent thing that the Set Out Foundation has uncovered.
Yeah.
Another example I can give, you've probably heard of the drug Ibrance. It's on the commercials a lot because it's one of the MBC metastatic breast cancer drugs that's given to patients. Of the patients that we have data on, we studied that, and what we uncovered was 30% of the patients that were on Ibrance, it was not effective at all.
Wow.
So think about it this way, if you were one of 10 women that you all had the same breast cancer and you didn't get a precision medicine analysis done on your cancer tumor, you just went ahead and did the cookie cutter treatment plan for your type of cancer. It's like a little bit of a lottery. 7 of you, it's going to work. And for 3 of you, it's not going to work until they put you on it. But if they do the precision analysis on the front end, they're going to know, hey, for this patient, it's not going to work for you. We're going to go to this drug instead.
Medicine analysis something that's offered upon diagnosis, or is it something you have to really ask for?
Have to be advocates for it. It's standard protocol that they're going to recommend that you get genetic testing done, right?
Mm,
They're going to want you
mm,
to test for the BRCA1, BRCA2 gene, okay? Because that will also help guide their treatment decisions. But a precision medicine analysis takes in a whole bunch of other layers of those cancer cells and really looks at the protein alignment. So you have to think about it this way. If I were to take 10 women who were all diagnosed triple negative breast cancer, which is one of the most aggressive forms, okay, all 10 of those cancer tumors, their cells, would look different. They are not identical. Everyone's body responds a little bit differently, right? That said, the precision medicine analysis allows each patient to get the most cutting edge information that's available about what would be the most effective drug for them. Now, there are cookie cutter treatment plans out there, and for the most part, they're pretty good, right?
mhm.
But almost all the time, they get to a point where they don't work. And that's when, if you have the precision medicine analysis, you can make the right or the next best choice, right? Some oncologists don't know about it. Some oncologists, I'd say 70% of the oncologists in the country are so busy, just their patient load, they can't keep
Yeah.
up with the research. So they're not aware that this is going on, right? For folks who have significant resources and are comfortable being advocates, they can go get a second and a third opinion and they can get a precision analysis done other places. But the reality is, for about 70% of the cancer population, the breast cancer population, they're relying on the direction of that one oncologist that gave them their diagnosis. And you have to think about it this way. They don't know anything about it. They just know all of a sudden they got this diagnosis. They're super scared. They're afraid. They're relying on this physician. And sometimes when you're in that position, you don't ask, what else can we do? Or do you think this would be helpful? Or you don't insist, you know what? I know you don't think we need that, but I'd like to go ahead and get that anyway. Because you don't
Right.
want to alienate the one person that's helping you, right?
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance, very delicate balance.
It's so incredible to hear, though, the innovation that the Site Out Foundation and all of you are doing and looking into. It's amazing where science has been able to take us. And
Mm.
just not having this even years ago, and now there's more opportunities, and it's critical to raise awareness of those opportunities, and it can save lives. And I just really, really appreciate you sharing all of that with us.
Yeah, and we so appreciate what our high schools and colleges are doing with Dig Pink. We have a new initiative called the Perfect Pass, which is a different model that's for clubs to get
Oh,
involved.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and last year was our pilot year. We're heading into our second year, and we've got a couple of regions that have committed to doing a region-wide event, which is really, really exciting. But, in Rick's vision, he always says this. He goes, if you give kids a chance, they'll show you their greatness, right? And if you think about sport historically has always been a platform for social change, always. And this whole foundation was started because Rick's mom was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer when he was a first-time high school volleyball coach. And his team rallied around him and hosted the first ever Dig Pink event. And then he got this idea, gosh, if our team could do this, could the volleyball community at large across the country, would they be interested in doing something like this? And it's so cool to see something that organically came from the volleyball community doing something that's so much bigger than just winning or losing a volleyball match. That's so important.
If a school or team does want to host a Dig Pink event, how would they get started?
Yeah, so the first thing is just to visit our website, www.side-out.org, and they can click right in the top of the bar. They're going to see Dig Pink. They can click on the drop down and it shows them getting started. Register your event, connect with your community engagement leader. We have community engagement leaders around the country that work with specific regions, our teams and schools from specific states. And they'll get on Google Chats. This is a really busy month. We're all traveling a lot because we try and go to Dig Pink events. I'm actually going to one in Bel Air, Maryland tomorrow. I'm
Oh,
leaving tonight, and we'll answer all the questions. We have all the resources for them. We give them all of our branding. We try and we create fundraising pages for them so they have links that they can share out to friends and family. And there's really two ways to think about Dig Pink. It's the event itself. You want it to be a fun event, and that's where the kids love it. Everyone's in pink. Maybe they're playing their rival. They want to draw a big crowd. They might have a raffle. They might have bake sales, and they raise money that way. And it's about creating this event experience. And it's also about honoring those in your community who are survivors or who have had an experience with metastatic breast cancer. And then at the same time, there's this whole other fundraising page link that we share for every school in the country so if you have a team of 12, each player can send out 10 or 12 emails to friends and family that might live grandma across the country. Say, hey, we're doing this Dig Pink event. Right on the link, it shares who the Side Out Foundation is, what we do, why we do what we do. There's a link to learn more about our research, and folks can make a donation right there. So it's not a super heavy lift for teams to get involved in. Our goal is we want to make sure that the kids understand that what they're doing is so, so important and so cool. And sometimes when we'll go to an event, we'll take sound bites and we'll ask, hey, can you tell us anything about this? What do you know about the Side Out Foundation? And we've learned that we have to do a better job getting the information in the hands of the student athletes because they all know Dig Pink
mhm,
and they all
mhm,
know Breast Cancer Awareness Month in
mhm.
October. They
Yeah.
don't perhaps know all the details. Now we have an ambassador program that we have started that we've got kids that they sign up to register to be a part of this ambassador program. They work with ambassadors across the country and they have an actual project that they are held accountable for. They've got a mentor that works with them at the school and they work one-on-one with the community engagement leader. They help whoever the organizer is. They are the primary lead for the student athletes on the team, put on their Dig Pink event, but they also have to do something around advocacy and awareness and sharing our mission and our research, make sure that it's getting out to their community. So Goucher College last year had, I think it was 7 players. They created a video and each player came in and talked a little bit about who the Side Out Foundation was, what metastatic breast cancer was, that they were hosting a Dig Pink event, why they were involved. And they kind of went through and they put it together. It was beautiful. And they pushed it out to the Goucher community. And that's a really fun project for them to do that they can literally do in, a couple snaps of a finger. I don't think I could create a video myself, but they're learning more about our mission.
That's amazing. And it's all word of mouth. And now more than ever, like we were saying earlier, it's so good to get the word out and have that connectivity and visibility. And I'm really passionate about raising awareness and using my platform as best as I can. So if there's anything else I can do as well, I would be more than happy to.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to be on, to get the word out and to get to have this kind of conversation. Happy to do it anytime,
Thank you,
you
Ellen. I
know.
appreciate it. And I do have one last question for you, if that's okay, before we close. So, with everything that you've gone through, if you could go back and tell yourself your junior year when your career ended with your injury, what would you go back and tell yourself at that moment?
Boy, that's a good question. 'Cause that was a really, really difficult thing for me.
Hmm.
I think I struggled for a good year and a half to get over that because, like many kids, I went to college because of the opportunity to continue to play sports and be an athlete, and I didn't know who I was and what I wanted to be yet, you know? I guess if I could tell myself anything, I would tell myself that, "You know what? It's okay because there's bigger things out there for you." I look back now at the road that I traveled, and it almost feels like every experience that I had in my professional and personal life career was really to prepare me for this job and this opportunity in this moment, which is much more important to me and bigger than anything I've ever done before. I'm a survivor myself. My mom passed away from metastatic breast cancer. I had two other sisters that were diagnosed with breast cancer. So the opportunity to take the skill set that I learned over the course of my career and help the Side Out Foundation is amazing.
You're doing amazing work, and I really look up to you for all you do. I appreciate all that you shared today. It means a lot.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on. Like I said, it's the volleyball community that's doing this. It's not
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
it's not Rick, it's our community.
Mhm.
And that's why I appreciate being on because we are organic to this community. We've been in this space with volleyball for the last 20 years, you
Mhm.
know.
If somebody is dealing with metastatic breast cancer, do they go to your website to look for help, or what are their best avenues when it comes to vouching for
The best
themselves?
avenue is to go to the website, okay?
Okay.
The same address, www.side-out.org, and then click on the research. And it says learn more. It'll talk about the research that we do, and then it actually talks about the precision medicine and gives you a 1-800 number to get in touch with us. We have a director of patient recruitment that will work one-on-one with our patients and get them connected to the lab. It's literally filling out paperwork and getting a pathology sample that's already been done, right? Just getting those records sent to our lab so that we can run the analysis.
Okay. Ellen, thank you so much for your time today, and more importantly, for all of the information that you shared today. And everyone listening, please visit side-out.org to learn how you can support the Dig Pink movement and help those living with metastatic breast cancer. Ellen, thank you for all that you've made a difference on in the world throughout your coaching and now what you're doing. And we're honored to have you share your stories. Thanks, everybody, for listening in, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks,
Okay.
Alexandra. It was great to be here.